Hi guys, which should you tackle first, trust or need? This is a continuation of a series of conversations that we've been having over the past two or three recordings, where I introduced you guys, that's for those of you who are not aware, to some of the ideas that have been espoused, or rather been strongly associated with the dude Tom Hopkins, legendary sales trainer, who has introduced some really profound and simple ideas about how to conduct your sales process that anyone can take on board. Even though it was something initially set up for people in the real estate industry, I have said repeatedly that it's one of my favorite frameworks, one of my favorite tools, because it can be easily adapted to any process. And I have spent the last couple of years trying to adapt it to wedding sales in particular, and other forms of businesses that I have been involved in, or rather involved with, every now and then. So, for those of you who've been following, you remember that trust and need are the first two elements in his process, which he says are absolutely critical that all buyers must be walked through. We have to take our brides and grooms gently by their hands and lead them through every single process, every single stage in the process, if we want to close a sale successfully, and if we want to have the honor of having served them. Okay, now, before we begin, a few words. Typically, sales has to be done in a predictable order. This is one thing that the neophytes don't quite get, and one thing that people tend to resist strongly when you start getting into conversations with them about sales, because people feel that sales is about toasting. You've got the swag, you've got the intelligence, you've got the composure, and so you should be able to freestyle and just wing it every single time. Of course, I've addressed it in older episodes that this is not a good idea, because it doesn't give you the best opportunity for repeatable sales success, because you don't have a steady framework to diagnose when things are going right, so that you know what to repeat, and more importantly, when things are going wrong, so that you know what to stop and what to improve on. So typically, sales has to be done in a predictable order. So for those of you who are increasingly becoming disciples of Tom Hopkins, or if you like what you hear, it doesn't have to be just Tom Hopkins. It's whether you follow Grant Cardone or Brian Tracy or whichever sales trainer is out there. I'm not sure who are the top dog sales trainers in the Nigerian market, so I can't make reference to them. But regardless of whoever it is that you follow, you'll find that there's a predictable order, a predictable process that you have to walk people through. Now, relating to this framework in particular, it would be unethical and unprofessional to try and squeeze money out from our brides and grooms, our customers, if we are up against people who are not quite ready to do business with us. You can see that that would leave a sour taste in their mouth, and even if it's something that can be done, which has been done in the past by people in other industry, it's indeed unethical and unprofessional, which is why in more Western climes, the United Kingdom and in America, there's a strong stigma attached to people who are involved in certain kinds of sales, like insurance sales, car sales, those sorts of old school industries, because in times past, we've had professionals there who were willing to use all the skills that they have gained over the years, the skills in persuasion, to basically just squeeze money out from people, even though they were not quite ready or didn't quite understand which insurance policy was suitable for them, or whether the car they were buying was a lemon or indeed the real deal. So it's unethical, it's unprofessional to try and squeeze money out from people until we're sure that they're ready to do business with us. Of course, you can score some wins every now and then if you're particularly persuasive, but let's learn from our older brothers in the West and how things have turned and how it has affected their reputation, and let's not make the same mistakes over here in Nigeria, especially since the wedding industry is a nascent industry. It's typically young, Well, that's assuming I have my facts right. I'll assume that the wedding industry popped off maybe in the noughts or before the noughts. I'd say late 90s and onwards. So either way, was still a very young industry, even if we started in the 80s. But I would really doubt that. Okay, so it's because of these concerns about being unethical and unprofessional, is because no matter the sales trainer that you're talking to, their initial concern would be to see how you are most effective. It's because of this that's why most sales frameworks have a prescribed order. Of course, you remember the Tom Hopkins order, which goes through trust, need, help, and hurry. And in the last episode, I hope I was able to sufficiently explain the philosophical underpinnings of his process. And that is, first of all, to work at reducing sales resistance. Sales resistance is the apprehension that the typical customer have when they meet with us. So it's confusing for a lot of wedding vendors when they go to bridal shows and they meet brides and grooms who seem less than enthusiastic when it comes to talking with us. But it's just a natural phenomenon. It has absolutely nothing to do with you or the way you look or the way you sound. People just have an apprehension generally when they walk into market situations, sales situations, because nobody wants to be sold, nobody wants to be hassled. So Tom Hopkins' philosophy, and those who are strongly associated with his school, they believe that number one thing that we have to do is to reduce sales resistance. We have to get the bride and groom to calm down. Let's get them to be mellow. Let's get them to be open and amenable. Let's get rid of the apprehension, and it's then that we're going to be able to move into the sales process, walk them through, find out whether we're a reliable fit, and if we are, then go on towards cutting that check and seeing how we can serve our brides and grooms. So we have to get rid of the apprehension first of all, and then when we do that, we can now start warming up the brides and grooms or their parents so that they are ready to buy from us. So the two elements that we're looking at today, trust and need, they are basically the main thrust. They're basically the kernel when it comes to reducing sales resistance. So trust and need, that's what we're going to use to reduce sales resistance. That's what we're going to use to reduce apprehension. That's what we're going to use to get the bride and the groom and their parents, or if you're negotiating with the wedding planner on behalf of the family, that's what it is that you're going to use to get everyone to calm down, to get everybody nice and mellow, so that we can have a reasonable conversation on what's on the table. Now, the main question: which should you tackle first, trust or need? Whether trust comes first or whether you have to deal with their need first depends on how the client found you. So, if you're at the wedding expo, which is the example that I've been giving ad nauseum, I'm using that one because for those of you who are new to this and who are willing to take a gander on this, this is going to be probably the number one way that you're going to meet loads of clients. So you are at the bridal fair, or maybe you put an advertisement in the church bulletin. You put it there, wedding planner for hire. You put it in the Sunday bulletin, and someone calls you. In those types of situations, when people meet you at the bridal fair, when people respond to your advert that you placed in the church bulletin, or they came to you through Instagram, basically whenever clients approach you unsolicited, that is, you didn't go out looking for them, it's okay to imply that they have heard of you before. Because if they found you in the church bulletin, most likely they might check up your website or your Instagram, something of that nature. If they meet you at the bridal fair, there's some assumption that since you're there at the fair, that you must be a credible vendor, because it's an assumption that the people who set up these bridal fairs would have done some form of pre vetting of vendors ahead of time. So there are some implied assumptions here that might make them trust you a little bit at first glance. So in this case, what you need to do when people run into you in this situation is not necessarily to try and establish trust per se. You're going to be doing both sometimes simultaneously, but you're going to have to lend a lot of emphasis here on determining their need. So someone walks up to you at the bridal fair, and your first approach is not to say, "Welcome to the stand. My name is Kemi of Kemi Bond Wedding Planning. We have 10 years industry experience and have been rated 5 stars by so and so planners, and these are our credentials with the International Wedding Planning Association, blah 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 blah." So that's not the first thing you have to do by listing out all your credentials and trying to build professionalism and credibility. The first thing that you have to do is to deal with their need. So your approach should be more of, hello, welcome to the stand. My name is Kemi. As you can see, this is Kemi Bond and Associates. So how can we help you today? You're the bride, or are you the groom? Are you the one getting married? Or you're here on behalf of your brother, sister, whatever. So basically those sorts of things, open-ended questions that get you into sorting out their need, questions that gets you answers, like questions that basically get you to see who is before you, why are they here, what kind of wedding do they have in mind, and yada yada. So those sorts of things. Now in the process of getting those answers, it's then you can start peppering in the other things that you mentioned before to also build credibility as well. So in this case, you're doing both of them simultaneously, but you have to put more emphasis on need. So the approach and the spirit of the idea would be, whether they approach you at the stand or they call you straight from the Instagram app, would be, so how can I help you? You getting married, congratulations. What date? What are we looking at? How many people? And then in the spate of the conversations that follow, you can now throw in all those other stuff about how you've been at this for 10 years and a member of the International Wedding Planners Association, and you've been rated 5 stars for Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and you have offices in Port Harcourt, Lagos, and Abuja, and blah blah blah. So yeah, so that's it. Initially, in this scenario, the reason why you shouldn't start off with trust is because, first of all, the client is still, there's still a little bit of apprehension. And so everything that you're going to say in this initial window is going to go over their head. It happens loads of times where you meet them and you start off by saying, "Hello, my name is Kemi Bon." You run through everything. And as the conversation goes on, some people get offended by this, but I don't think you should be, because it's, they're just human, especially when you start off rattling all kinds of, facts. And then later on, it becomes clear that they don't remember your name or your business name or what you said your credentials were, and things of that nature. So it was because there was still a little bit of apprehension. And quite frankly, when you get into this approach of trying to establish trust immediately in these kinds of situations, it easily overwhelm the client with too much info. So trying to deal with their need first, it also serves another purpose, another advantage, because when you try to deal with their need, especially by asking questions, you get them talking first. And for the average person, when they start talking, when it becomes clear that the whole thing is about them, that's the customer, the bride, the groom, and it's not about you, the vendor, they get to relax. A little bit, and it'll also help you, the vendor, because the more they talk, the more you'll get a sense of what it is they're looking for, their temperament, things that will help you decide on how best to handle the sale, and also to determine whether this is the kind of person that you would like working with or not. Like for wedding planners, for instance, I think wedding planners and maybe wedding photographers, I think we spend the most time with brides and grooms in the lead up to the wedding. And I would say after the wedding, photographers and videographers, we spend the most time with the couples after everyone has signed off, typically, because most people, the delivery is going to be on the wedding day with crunch time leading up to the wedding. But for wedding planners, wedding photographers, wedding videographers, we're still in the flow of things leading up to the event, and then after the event we still have a few touch points. So it's not unusual to have wedding planners, and I know a few in Abuja, who will skirt around the bride or dodge a bride because they don't quite like her attitude, or because they think the groom is unworkable. Because even though the money is going to be good, they know that if they're able to pick up the check now and the wedding is going to be in 3 or 4 months, the wedding planner knows, or the photographer knows, that this is going to be a really tough 4 weeks ahead of having to deal with these people because of personality mismatches and what have you. So that's why it's also a good idea to start with their need, because when you start with need and you get them talking, you're able to suss them out, and if there's a fit product and service wise, and if there's a fit personality wise. So that's what happens when people when they come to you first. Now, on the other hand, if you're the one who goes out soliciting, then assume that they have never heard of you before. And then in those situations, it's appropriate to go into those skits where you try to establish trust, first. Because in those types of situations where you're the one who does the soliciting and you approach the bride cold, let's say you got the number from her friend and her friend hasn't given her the heads up that you're going to get in touch. In situations like that, it's truly a cold outreach. Even if she's had the heads up but she's never heard about you before, it's a very cold outreach. So trying to do a little bit of trust building at first. Yes, that would make some sense, because when she picks up the phone, or when you walk into her office or into her house, or when you guys meet up at the eatery that you decided you were going to meet up at, the very first thing on her mind, the bride and the groom, most typically will be, who is this dude that is approaching me? So who is he and what's he on about? Who is this wedding planner? Who's this photographer? Who is this cake person? Especially since we're in an environment where people typically don't do direct soliciting. So yeah, the very number one thing on their mind will be, who's this dude or who is this girl and what's she on about? And so trying to establish trust in that case would be a nice thing to do. Although typically for me at that stage, I still leave my name out of it anyway. Because I don't think it's necessary, and also because I use that as a thermostat to gauge how much progress we're making. If I go there and I say, oh, thank you very much for taking the meeting. I got your number from Fadekemi. She says you're getting married soon. And I thought it would be a good idea for me to call because I've had 10 years experience in the industry. I've happily served Kemi and her family members at 3 of their weddings before, where we didn't have any issues. So given that relationship that I've had with Kemi's family in the past, I thought it would be a good idea for me to call you up and to see how I can serve you and your family at your upcoming wedding. So in this case, the little spiel that you've given is you've tried to establish some commonality. You've told the bride that you know her friend Kemi, and that you've done some work with Kemi's family before. You've handled 3 weddings for them. So that's establishing some commonality between both of you. Shows that you guys have a shared network. The bit about the 3 weddings that you've handled in the past, that's to hint at some credibility, that you're not a newbie, you've done this before, and apart from that, you have done it for someone in your personal network 3 times, and there haven't been any issues let's see. Okay, I can't remember what else I said, but basically every single element that I just freestyled with over there, you can see that there are little elements here and there that have been dropped in to show that this is me, this is what I do, and this is why I'm credible, and this is why you ought to listen. And then from your early presentation, your early spiel that you give, trying to establish trust. From there, you can easily segue into the need conversations. Now, in this case, since you've approached them, since the first time you're approaching them cold, it might not be a bad idea to ask outright, do you guys have a wedding photographer? Do you guys have a wedding planner? Do you guys have a cake artist? Whatever it is that you are selling, it might not be a bad idea to ask if they have, because this is cold outreach, and it's from there that you'll be able to find out that maybe they don't have, but they've been talking to 2 or 3 other people, and so on and so forth. But basically, whatever sales framework you follow has a philosophy and a process for how to deal with these sorts of situations where you have other tenders on the table. So, oh yes, the bit where I said I leave out my name is because I use that as a thermostat, because we start off with the whole trust pitch. Eventually, we're asking questions and we're in the need phase before the meeting wraps up. A lot of times, if you had good vibes, then the bride or the groom will say, oh guy, by the way, what's your name? So I can store it properly on my phone. I use that as a thermostat to see if we are vibing in the right direction. But don't take that to be a general rule, because I've noticed that there's some people who don't, at least in that initial meeting, they don't seem to give 2 Fs about what your name is. If they have stored your name as XYZ photographer or ABC wedding planner, that's fine for them, because we all have different ways that we try to remember people on our contact list. So yeah, there's some people who don't give a hoot about what your name is, but who still end up vibing real nice with you, and you do get to serve them at the wedding, and then all these other pleasantries, getting to know each other and all whatnot, now happens after the wedding. So yeah, there've been couples like that, and it's been super dry and official in the beginning, and then we all got nice and personal after we were done with the wedding. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But bottom line is, which should you tackle first, trust or need? That would depend on how it is that the client found you. If they're the ones who came to you, you're not the one who solicited them, that means we can assume that means they've got a little bit of information about us before, and in that case, we're ready to launch in with determining the need. The emphasis should be on the need, even though we can still try and drop hints every now and then to try and establish, to try and build our trust and credibility in their sight. So when they meet us first, proper approach, start with the need. Basically, thank you very much for your call. How can I help you today? And then when you're the one who goes soliciting, let's assume they've never heard you before. Let's start off trying to establish some trust first before we go into need. Basically, get them to be calm and to realize that we're professional. We've done this before. If there's any commonality that you can establish, so like if they were referred to you by a friend, be sure to bring up that friend's name. Let's see, what else? Stuff that you've done in the past. Early on, when I started this back in Lagos, I had a little book. I printed out a portfolio. I think I had done like 9 weddings at the time, and I just sprinkled out a couple of photos across the book, and I was able to get a full album from about 8 or 9 weddings. And I would take that across I'll take that with me at meetings, and I would show the bride and the groom, and that was one of the ways that I tried to establish credibility as well. So basically, if you have any materials about building trust, building credibility, any podcasts you listen to, stuff like that, all those things will come in handy. These frameworks aren't set in stone, so just get the journal, sketch, and see how else you can glean some more information to add to these processes. Fatten some places up and trim some places down. Basically, make these processes your own. So Thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based photographer Tavishima Ayede. As usual, questions, comments, inquiries, hit me up on email ayede.taver@gmail.com. I am on Twitter at ayedetaver. No space, no symbols in between. You can also hit me up on the Anchor app. If you just look for the plus sign with the thought bubble next to it, you'll be able to leave me a voice message, and I'll be able to include that as part of a future show if I think that your question is something that is shared by a generality of the audience. So you can hit me up on this Anchor app as well. That's for those of you who are listening to it on Anchor. As far as I can tell, I don't think that feature exists on iTunes or Google. Then you can also WhatsApp or Telegram on 080-6466-2140. For my foreign audience, don't forget that you'll have to use the country code, which is +234. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'll catch you all at the next episode.